This episode is brought to you by Accenture. When your advertising operations fall out of sync, everything else follows. Spotify and Accenture are working together to reinvent the rhythm of ad sales, using automation, analytics, and smarter workflows to simplify campaign delivery and access better data across the business. The result? Less time spent on operations, more time connecting brands with the moments and fandoms that matter most. Learn more at accenture.com/Spotify.
The new LinkedIn Hiring Pro can't undo your last hire, the no-show. Who set you back because they didn't show up on day one, or day two, or ever again. And now your product launch is delayed because you're talking to alien abduction podcasters to track them down. But LinkedIn Hiring Pro can help make sure your next hire sticks. In fact, businesses who use LinkedIn are 24% less likely to reopen a role in the next 12 months. Hire right the first time with LinkedIn Hiring Pro. Post a free job today at linkedin.com/quality.
I was told that I was pulled out of normal classes at the end of second grade and sent to special ed, which was essentially a bunch of students who were going nowhere, and I found it infuriating. I was left mainstream just in math and science, and I got F because I'm dyslexic. So at that point, I said enough of the discrimination.
Welcome to the SwagAbility Show, everyone, where real-life challenges meet practical tools, empowering stories, and solutions that support your daily living. I'm your host, Steve Wagstaff, and today we're driving into a topic that impacts millions of families worldwide, the topic of dyslexia. Did you know that up to 15 to 20%, depending on study you read, show symptoms of dyslexia? And roughly 5 to 10% will experience severe persistent reading difficulties that significantly impact not just their schoolwork, but self-worth and confidence. But today's conversation isn't about statistics or to intimidate. It's about clarity, confidence, and hope. We're focusing on real solutions. My guest today is Russell Van Brocklen, also known as the Dyslexia Professor. Russell has helped countless families transform daily reading frustration into meaningful academic wins using his unique writing-first approach. He's going to break it down for us, and we're going to get into it now. Russell, thank you for taking a few minutes to hang out with us on the SwagAbility Show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's been looking forward to this one for a while now. Before we maybe talk methods and results and all that good stuff, can you take my listeners back to the beginning of this whole thing? Russell, as a kid and your upbringing, to get us started, if you don't mind delving back that deep.
Sure. I was told that I was pulled out of normal classes at the end of second grade and sent to special ed, which was essentially a bunch of students who were going nowhere, and I found it infuriating. I was left mainstream just in math and science, but the rest I was in special ed. I found out later that my IQ was approximately 127. So it wasn't a fit for me, but I had to stay there. I got really upset when it was in fifth grade and I wanted to participate in a pilgrims project because I had two relatives that were on the Mayflower. One was the religious leader and the other one was the biggest malcontent of the community. So, I tried to use that as an excuse with my parents. Didn't go very well when I was younger. But I missed that. I finally forced my way out through the school. I had a neighbor who was on the school board for history in eighth grade, and they told me I was going to fail. I ended up getting hundreds on every test. Besides one, I mistook a B for a D, so I got just below 100. And I won the history award for eighth grade. Went on to high school. I did all college prep, with a slight problem of that. I ended up finishing up college with a first grade reading and writing level. I developed a system that for a very short period of time, and it was quite unpleasant, to put it mildly, that forced my reading and writing to jump up briefly. and then it would crash down again. So I finished that up. Really, the interesting point started is when I was finishing up college, and I wanted to know how laws were created. I didn't want some idea, some course. I wanted to know. So I signed up for the New York State Assembly internship program. And so I show up, I said, here's my neuropsychological evaluation. I have a first grade
What
reading
age?
and writing level.
So roughly what age would this be when
Oh,
you're...
I was senior year of college.
Okay.
Okay. So I show up there with my neuropsych that says I have a first grade reading and writing level. The director of the program kind of freaked. He said, this just can't work. Because normally in a typical internship, you had the assembly member, the chief of staff, who was an intern probably a year or two ago, and the intern. All right. So they take it up to the speaker's office. The speaker's office said, listen, we accepted this kid. You're going to accommodate him somehow. I don't want to hear it. We're not kicking him out. So they got a team together. They came up with a radical plan. They literally pulled me out of the legislative office building and they took me to the Capitol, which is a huge violation of what the internship is about because the social component with the other interns is huge. All right. And I didn't have that. I mean, I almost never saw them again besides the academic portion. So they bring me to the Majority Leaders Program and Council's office that runs the assembly day to day. And I go in and they're very nervous that I'm going to be upset. And I said, well, what am I doing here? They had zero clue what to do with an undergrad intern. They treated me like a graduate student, which was a real staff position. So I'm like, cool. All right. I will give up the social component to have a real internship. So, and I saw why they placed me there because they had 3 administrative assistants who could go through my horrendous writing and turn it into something I could turn in each week. And they said, don't worry. The director here has, he went to the Ivy League and we do this for him. I turned in my first assignment. They looked at it and go, okay, this is special. I said, you're not going to offend me. We got it cleaned up and it went great. And then for the academic portion, we had to do a huge paper. Instead, I did a very standard accommodation is I would do hours long presentation with hours long questions and answers. So it went great. I had a recommended GPA of A- for 15 credits. So I'm thinking, yeah, well, think about where I was at the time. I was in the Majority Leaders Program and Council's office. I could pick up the phone and talk to the people that ran the place anytime. Because instead of going home at 5 o'clock at night, I stayed there and I would work to 9, 10, 11 o'clock. I didn't care. I came in on Saturdays. I came in on Sundays, whatever they needed. All right. So I had offers of being a lobbyist. I had offers of all these things I could do at different state agencies because of the access that I had. That's what I was going to do with my life. I wasn't supposed to be doing this.
Yeah.
And then it happened.
Well, we'll talk about that, how it happened. Before we get to the how it happened and what's been produced since, can you put an age area when you first realized maybe that learning wasn't coming as easily as you might have thought it would compared to other kids, or came differently than other kids? Was it recognized? Did you recognize it?
Yeah, it was second grade. I took a box of 64 colored crayons and I started going through the dictionary, learning to read when I forced it. Remember, I always had to force it. And I started reading in different color sequences.
Colors. Okay.
It took me years, but I went through most of the dictionary, turning different words and definitions into multiple colored sequences. You can forget about trying to understand it. I've tried explaining it to PhDs and they still can't figure out how I read anything, but I read in colors.
And how did how did the teachers respond to that? Because that's totally not mainstream of what they're being taught at teachers college. So how do they handle that?
They never knew anything. I found that my teachers were completely useless until I was challenged in eighth grade. Remember when I said I got the history award? I could never take notes. I could never study. I just remembered what he said. He actually challenged us to think, and then I just went and I just remembered what he said and
Yeah.
responded.
I was about to
And
ask you that. So there was a teacher or mentor or a moment where like there was a specific individual that
yeah, well,
was
what
key?
happened? Yeah, he his name was Mr. Fitzgerald. He was the football coach, and he would
Okay.
come in every week, and he'd be happy as heck. And I said, "Why are you happy?" He said, "You got another perfect 100 on my test."
Football
And
coach.
yeah, well, no, he was he. This is for social studies, but he was a
Gotcha.
very he had a very powerful figure. He was ex-military. All right.
Gotcha.
So he comes in and everybody asks, well, how do you getting hundreds? I said, I've just listened to what he said and then I just mark it on the test. Like there's nothing hard about this. They thought it was. But to get to the more interesting aspect is when I went back to my campus, I went back to the flagship campus of the State University of New York system, State University of New York Center at Buffalo. And the political science department looked at what happened and they didn't like the accommodations that I was granted. Remember, this was the state government under the Speaker of the Assembly who came up with this. So they said, we don't like this. So here's your 15 credits of F.
Okay.
Okay. So they recommended A minus and I got
Yeah.
F because I'm dyslexic. So at that point, I said enough of the discrimination.
Mm.
So I decided to go to the professors that I still liked. I said, how do I force myself to read and write really well so I could show other dyslexics in grad school? And they said, law school. So I went to law school. Second day of contracts, Professor Warner called me. What they do in law school is they use the Socratic method. They embarrass the heck out of you, asking you questions you can't answer, and they crush you until you adapt. That didn't happen to me. What I found out later for dyslexics going to grad school is day one or soon thereafter, we own the place, like completely and totally. We're the top students. And he called on me and he's trying to knock me out. It didn't happen. I didn't respond as a student. I responded as his equal. Now he's a dyslexic professor for 30 years, and yes, I responded as his equal.
Let's talk about a couple terms, just for followers that have heard of dyslexia, but can you, in its basic form,
Mhm.
give us a definition of dyslexia? So,
Sure.
yeah, the average listener can know what you're dealing with.
This is a book called Overcoming Dyslexia by Sally Shaywitz, second
Mhm.
edition. She's a medical doctor at Yale. This is the definitive book in my field. All right.
Oh,
That's dyslexia.
the brain,
Yes. Do you see how the back part of your brain has all this neuroactivity?
right?
Now, the back part of my brain, do you see how there's essentially virtually nothing going on?
Yes, yes,
Now, do you see the front part of your brain doesn't have much going on?
I do see that.
And the front part of my brain is about 2.5 times overactive.
Huh. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, what I inadvertently found when Professor Warner called on me is, according to Yale, the front part of the brain deals with articulation followed by word analysis. He was asking me to articulate, and I did as his equal. He's going after me. I'm yelling back at him. He's yelling at me 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. He finally said, Russell, in the interest of time, I have to move on to the next case. You couldn't be any more correct. I essentially solved the fundamentals of law school in that 15-minute exchange. we're going to do an intervention period to get them to
Yeah.
grade level.
Yes.
During that time, we have to focus on their speciality, their area
Right.
of extreme interest and ability.
Yes.
Number 2 is what I found. This is what I learned from senior dyslexic professors, full professors at a major research university. What they told me is you cannot ask them the way they do typically in a public school. You start off with something really big, and then you eventually get down to something specific long afterwards. For a dyslexic, that's like grabbing fog. So you cannot ask a dyslexic during the intervention period a question like, what effect did Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech have on the American 1960s civil rights movement? A good student will just know what to do and just go do it. A dyslexic is just frozen because we have nothing to latch onto. Because if you ask a dyslexic, and this is one of the most important things I can tell you, in your speciality, do you have ideas flying around your head at light speed, but key question, but with little to no organization? They're going to say yes. So what we have to do is help force their brain to organize itself by using writing as a measurable output. So again, let me repeat that. In your speciality, your area of extreme interest and ability, do you have ideas flying around your head at light speed, but with little to no organization? Yes. The solution is to force your brain to organize itself by using writing as a measurable output. Now, once you do that, it gets so much easier. So dyslexics like learning from the specific to the general. So, for example, we asked what personally compelled Martin Luther King to want to give his famous speech. Once you do that, we can then go to his biography, find the answer. That answer gives us a question, which we answer, which gives us a question, which gives us an answer. That forces us to learn in a sequential, step-by-step manner. It forces our brain to organize itself using writing as a measurable output. And that's the biggest problem because the front part of our brain is 2.5 times overactive. It's really, there's very active with almost no organization. Once you force organization onto it, your spelling, grammar, a lot of things self-correct in huge ways.
That's amazing. That for the average person listening, I don't think we grasp the whole beauty of that. But yeah. I'm thinking back to that 10-year-old. You had her put a. Is it safe to call it like a filing system to how to file information that's going in their head?
Yeah. What I ended up doing to Casey, remember, I said this isn't going to work. No other kid would do this system. This was just the most motivated kid I ever met. I said, Casey, here's how you teach reading. I got her this again. Here's the book. Theodore Roosevelt. I'm sorry, The Rise of Theodore Roosevelt. Okay.
Yeah.
I got her the audiobook. So she would start listening to the first sentence. Any word that she didn't know, she typed out the word, not on an iPad, not on an iPhone, certainly not handwriting. It had to be a real keyboard. So she used a laptop. She typed out the word. Then she looked up the word in Merriam-Webster's online dictionary. And then she picked her definition and she copied the definition. Now, if you copy and paste the definition, you're wasting your time. It is completely useless. So she typed it out. And then she went through the first section. Every word she didn't know. That's what she did. Then she went through it again and again until eventually she could read that section. Then she moved on to the next section. So within 6 months, now remember, she's locked herself in a room 2 to 3 hours a night, most of the days during the summertime. So you can imagine the grind. I don't do it this way. Normally, I teach a very kind, gentle writing system where this is eventually incorporated. But this is what Casey wanted. So in 6 months from that, she knew every word, every definition. Where is she now? I finished working with Casey at the end of 8th grade. She was ready for college then. When it came time for her SATs, for ACTs, she already remembered 70-80% of what those definitions were. She didn't have to study vocabulary. She knew it. Last I knew, she was in college doing really well. She said that she got her first big girl job, and that was the last I heard from her.
I was kind of going around in my head when I was listening to this, and where the mind, the brilliant mind, with the information in there, just not how the world would expect it to be well-rounded, like you said, the schools expect. Where do successful dyslexics find themselves excelling at job-wise?
Oh, before we get that, I need to finish up with the model so you parents can start using this tonight.
Perfect.
So what you just understood, remember what I just told you about Casey, that was a unique situation.
Sure.
Don't try to replicate how she did it. I'm just giving you an example of how motivated these kids are once you're in their speciality, teaching them from the specific to the general. All right. The final thing is what your audience can start using tonight is I'm going to go back to the science. Okay. This is overcoming dyslexia again. Going back to the brain scan, that front part of the brain is 2.5 times overactive. Yale said it's articulation followed by word analysis. I found that if I flipped it to word analysis followed by articulation, far more effective for your typical student.
Articulation is, let's define that for us.
I will as I give you the example. Okay. So what I'm looking at here is at the elementary school level, the biggest problem that I get all the time from parents and teachers is that their dyslexic kids appear to be writing essentially randomly placed misspelled words. They don't even know where to start. So how we do that is we first need to take an example. Do you know, or did you ever know a dyslexic elementary school kid?
Yeah, he got picked on all the time.
Okay, we want to protect his identity, so I need you to make up a name for him.
Sure, Johnny.
Johnny. How old was Johnny? What grade level? And was he essentially writing randomly placed misspelled words?
Yeah, like he would belong, like the terminology back then before, words started to hurt people was, special needs or special ed, not normal, right? Like things we try to not use. So yeah, he spent more time in special ed.
But when you knew him, how old was he?
He was in grade school with me, so I knew him from, I guess up through to grade 8. Lost track.
Okay,
in high
so
school.
let's go back to 5th grade. Was he writing really badly, like randomly placed misspelled words?
Oh yeah, he would still be, quite at what they would say base. It used to be basic, general, advanced before in high school. He would have been at basic or below. Yeah.
Okay. What was his speciality? What was his area of extreme interest and ability?
He never stopped talking.
But what is he? Like some kids it's baseball, some kids like
sport. He was a good athlete, super good athlete.
So what was his favorite sport?
I think baseball.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's go. So what the first thing you're going to do when you have a kid like this is you're going to write down 10 things that they really, really like and 10 things that they really, really don't like. All right. Then what we're going to do is you're going to go again, not an iPad, not an iPhone, certainly not handwriting. You're going to be typing this out on a real keyboard. All right. So usually it's a laptop. You're going to type out, as the teacher, the instructor, you're going to type out hero +, what are we talking about? Then you're going to have Johnny copy that. A lot of parents freak out. Well, you can't copy. Professor James Collins, Strategies for Struggling Writers, Default Writing Strategy of Copying. It's okay. They're going to copy that. So now we have hero +, what are we talking about? We're going to switch out hero for Johnny. Johnny +, what are we talking about? Now we're going to switch out what are we talking about for the first thing on his list that he really loves, and that's baseball. So we got Johnny plus sign. What are we talking about? We're going to swap that out for baseball. Johnny plus sign baseball. See how we got there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to try to trick you with the simplest questions ever. If you answer them correctly, this will work. If you don't, it's not. And most people get an epiphany on what dyslexia really is. Do you think I'll be able to fool you with the simplest questions ever?
Absolutely.
Okay, well, we'll try to get it correct. All right. So you have to do exactly what I ask. So we got Johnny plus sign baseball. We need to swap out plus sign for a word to complete the sentence. Here's my question. Does Johnny like or dislike baseball?
Yeah. I mean, because the love factor that they have for the child to want to see them succeed, I can see parents, eating it up because they've probably banged their head against the wall trying to figure out a theory. Or, yeah. Yeah. Did you find growing up, I don't get too personal, uh, did you find that you ended up getting in trouble a lot as a kid just the because education was just problematic for you?
Actually, I got my Eagle Scout, so no. I was generally the well behaved kid. What got me is when I forced my way out of special ed for high school. I walked in and we had to select our person for student government. I automatically selected this one girl in my class who was always the one who organized everything. I voted for her. She voted for me. I won by one vote. And then I became my class president. I was that history nerd that, and I was a cross country runner. I joined cheerleading in college. To broaden my social skills, and then I went on and I started doing this, and it's uh, it was a different experience. I always found I did a lot better with the intellectual folks, and a lot of the kids that I work with, when you get in their speciality, they're scary smart. I had one boy, I think you might just find this interesting. He said he was interested in World War II. He was 11. Let's call him Johnny just again to protect his identity. And his reading and writing was horrific. And I said, okay, do you want European or do you want the Pacific? He said, Europe. I said, okay, beginning, middle, or end? He said, beginning. I said, oh, okay. I assigned him a book that was by a new author called Ackerson, who's a top historian of our generation. And it was called Army at Dawn. I said, you're going to laugh at this. It was amusing. It's the best narrator ever. His name was George Guidell. And you wouldn't believe how messed up things are. So he just couldn't get enough of this of it. I literally went to his principal and I said, this kid's doing really advanced stuff. You got to stop assigning him homework. And they agreed. The teachers hated it. He was on that thing like crazy. It took him about 10 months. And he was reading that book on his own, which is like, 10th, 11th grade level. And he's in sixth grade. And his teachers are saying, well, he's not the best reader in the class because they had some kids literally ready to go to college. It was a very wealthy suburban school district. But they said, he's one of the best readers now. What's going on? And I explained the same thing we discussed today. And they're like, well, we really can't do that. I said, I know, but I can. And then we walked him up that craft of research. And we ended up just stopping at the advanced context because his parents are saying, we know some college professors, and they're saying these body paragraphs are good enough for college. Do we need to go further? I said, well, it's up to you. I said, the other stuff's really advanced. They said, well, he's 11, now he's 12. I think we'll just stick with this. So then he was on the high honor roll after that. But he said he just loved the book and he continued that research. And he ended up majoring in history. And you might be asking, well, what did he do with a history degree? I said, well, he went down to Wall Street and he became an analyst.
Mm.
And they're like, what does history have to do with being an analyst? Well, with history, you have to ask the right questions, do research. And as a dyslexic, think of here's one thing I'd like to leave with you on. Shark Tank. How many of the sharks do you think are dyslexic out of the 6?
2.
3. Barbara, Mr. Wonderful, and Damon.
Really?
Okay. Typically, dyslexics are great to work with because we were treated so badly in school. So he knew how to be nice to people. He knew how to ask the right questions, and he knew how to write up his answers. And he said, yes, he had an administrative assistant to help with the writing. He was so good at what he did. He came back and I said, yeah, this is what one of my professors told me. He said, if you want somebody, and this was in the later 90s, somebody who's really good at writing, there are 10 people that he could recommend that are majors in communications that write beautifully. They're 35, 40,000 a year. He said they're cheap. Okay. You need to become valuable enough where you can get one of those. And now we have artificial intelligence. So if anybody is thinking about they need to do some writing, what I use Opus 4.5. Cost me $100 a month. $25 a week, and I've never reached its user limit. And its writing is fantastic. It mimics what I do, and it's just tremendous.
Okay, final takeaways for parents whose kid he just shuts down. Homework, whatever, shut down. Give them one practical strategy that a parent listening, other than going to your website, which I think every parent ought to do if they have.
Actually, that is my answer. Go to my website, go to download free guide, set up a time to speak with me, because I'll tell you exactly what this is like. I'll talk to the kid, and they're going to be like, I don't want to do anything. I'm like, Johnny, really? Okay. Tell me what the issue is. And I say, you know what? I was you. And they're like, no, you're not. You were never like me. And then I start asking one of 3 questions. Okay. They're like, how do you know? Because I said, I was you. I was reading and writing at the 1st grade level. Here's my documentation paid for by New York State. If some actually want to go over it. And then they're like, okay, how do we fix this? Then we go over. I said, we have to go in your what we went through today. And we find that out. I said, if we're in your speciality, are you interested? Yes, but only in my speciality. Okay. So we go through that. Once they're at grade level, then it's a lot easier to translate them back into school, and they're fine.
For the individual that's listening to this and hearing you talk about children, but they've struggled for years. They're at work, but they know they're reading. It's just not there. Does it work for an adult that wants to connect with you? And
yes, it's actually a lot easier to work with adults. The most advanced guy I worked with was very dyslexic. He had a master's in business administration from Columbia. I just took him through my original program, and he was absolutely fine after that. To give you an example, when I asked, what's the primary opinion of the argument? Any AP English 9th grade would tell it to me in less than a second. It took him about a minute. After he practiced it a lot, he got really quick. And that's with a person who graduated with good grades from an Ivy League business program, graduate level. So yes, this works very well with adults. And if they say, well, do you have enough to teach me? I say, I can give you the full craft of research, which is PhD level. So yes, this is the exact process that the top consulting companies do, that the top investment banks do, that Wall Street does. It's just in a way that I've made it much simpler by combining it with overcoming dyslexia, so you can learn it at a much faster pace, and it still gives you what you need.
Before we go, give us the website once more. We'll have it in the show notes, but people don't want to go to the show notes. Just give it once more.
It's simply go to dyslexiaclasses.com with an S, dyslexiaclasses.com. There's a button there that says download free guide, answer a few questions, and set up a time to speak with me. It's 30 minutes, doesn't cost you anything.
It's been very educational, very mind blowing. And where did the hat and fedora come in?
You know, I was looking at this and like, how do I visually distinguish myself from everybody else? And I'm a history guy.
Yes.
I did AP English, European, and American history in high school. And I just looked back at this and I said, you know what? I'm looking at all these old shows and all these guys are wearing this. So I figured, you know what? I'm just going to do it as well.
It's a great brand look. It's a great look. Russell, it's been a blast. I really appreciate the time you spent with us. Parents, in the show notes, there'll be the website, and I would encourage anyone that is struggling with those, their children and even older adults. There's no shame in learning. And if there's a way out of the box than the typical government programs running and it works, I think it's worth every opportunity to look into it. If you found value in our conversation today, would you do my wife and I a huge favor? Would you subscribe to our YouTube channel at SwagAbility Inc.? And if you really want, head to our website at swagability.com just to learn about what our nonprofit foundation does. And until next time, friends, stay encouraged, stay faithful, keep thriving where life finds you. Wags out.